The U.S. Marshals have just released age progression images of convicts who escaped Alcatraz over the years. Speculation has mounted on whether these men are still alive, and for 55 years, the daring 1962 escape from Alcatraz, America's most infamous inescapable prison, has remained one of America's most tantalizing unsolved mysteries. How could these prisoners have escaped this super-secure prison? Did Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers drown in the frigid San Francisco Bay, or did they defy all odds and slip away into anonymity? Well, it's finally been solved, and what they found is nothing short of shocking. Alcatraz, often called the Rock, became the epitome of an inescapable prison. Built on a rocky island in the heart of San Francisco Bay, it was home to the most notorious criminals in American history, including Al Capone and George Machine Gun Kelly. The conditions at Alcatraz were designed to break the human spirit, with cold, damp cells, minimal privileges, and the ever-present threat of isolation. Its location, surrounded by freezing waters, swift currents, and a constant mist, made escape nearly impossible. For decades, the legend of Alcatraz's impenetrability was built not only on the harshness of the prison itself but also on the surrounding waters. The bay's icy temperatures, combined with treacherous tides and unpredictable currents, were seen as nature's ultimate guard against escape. The idea of surviving such a harrowing swim seemed unfathomable, reinforcing the perception that escape from Alcatraz was simply impossible. Yet, despite the fortress-like reputation of the prison, numerous attempts were made by inmates to flee over the course of its operation. 36 men attempted to escape. Some tried swimming the bay, others used makeshift rafts, and a few even tunneled through walls. However, 23 of these attempts ended in recapture, 6 men were shot, and 2 drowned. Yet the most intriguing of all these attempts remained the unsolved case of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence. They, along with another inmate named Allen West, devised a bold escape plan in 1962 that would become one of the most famous in history. Their escape was audacious in scope. They worked for months, carefully planning their every move. They fashioned lifelike dummies to leave behind in their cells, crafted tools from seemingly mundane prison items, and even created a makeshift raft. In June of 1962, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers disappeared from their cells, seemingly vanishing into thin air. The authorities were left with only one conclusion: the men had drowned in the choppy, icy waters of the bay. But that conclusion was never entirely satisfying. The mystery lingered for decades, and with the release of new evidence in recent years, the question has once again been thrust into the public consciousness. Did they survive, or did the waters claim them? Over the years, speculation has mounted on whether these men are still alive, and recently obtained evidence has prompted authorities to reopen the case. The reopening of the case, the 2013 letter, and renewed speculation. The story of the Alcatraz escape lay dormant for many years, with the official stance being that Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers did not survive. In fact, by 1979, the FBI closed its investigation, declaring the case solved and the escapees presumed drowned. However, the mystery refused to fade, and in 2013, the case took an unexpected turn when the San Francisco Police Department received a chilling letter. The letter was signed by John Anglin, one of the escapees, and it claimed that he, along with his brother Clarence and Frank Morris, had indeed made it out alive and lived on the run for over 5 decades. Was this it? Had they finally found it? The letter was far from a simple confession. It detailed John Anglin's life after the escape, claiming that he had lived in various locations, including Seattle, North Dakota, and Southern California. The letter's contents were particularly striking because they included personal details about the escape itself, information that only someone intimately involved could know. But the letter also contained a heartbreaking twist. John Anglin was reportedly dying of cancer and was seeking help from the authorities. He wanted to strike a deal, possibly in exchange for his cooperation or a reduced sentence for his long-committed crimes. The authorities, both intrigued. The authorities took the letter seriously but were far from convinced. They launched an investigation into its authenticity, including handwriting analysis, forensic testing, and even background checks on the Anglin brothers. However, despite the compelling details in the letter, the results were inconclusive. There was no solid proof to verify that the letter had truly been written by John England, leaving the authorities and the public with even more questions. The mystery was further fueled by the fact that John England's letter appeared to contain enough factual details to give it weight but was also vague enough to keep its authenticity in doubt. Was this a genuine confession from a man seeking redemption after decades of evasion, or was it a hoax designed to attract attention? The answer remains elusive as the investigation into the letter's origins continued to yield no definitive conclusions. As the investigation into the letter progressed, it reignited the debate over whether the men had actually escaped and survived the treacherous waters of the bay. The overwhelming assumption had been that the men perished in the cold, churning waters, yet the more evidence emerged, the more plausible it seemed that they could have indeed made it to freedom. Had they survived? If so, how did they manage to live for so long without detection? Within law enforcement circles, the reaction was far more conflicted. For the FBI and U.S. Marshals, the letter was both a potential embarrassment and a haunting vindication of long-dismissed leads. For years, the official stance was that the men had drowned, with investigators citing the bay's strong currents, low water temperature, and lack of confirmed sightings. To accept the letter as real would mean admitting that their most infamous manhunt had failed and that the escapees had succeeded in vanishing without a trace. Privately, retired agents and insiders began speaking out. Some claimed they had long believed the escapees had help, possibly from family members or organized crime contacts. Others admitted that the initial investigation left many questions unanswered, particularly the curious lack of physical evidence proving the men drowned. One retired U.S. Marshal described the revelation as a professional bruise that never fully healed. This renewed interest in the case brought Alcatraz back into the public eye, sparking new debates and theories. Some suggested that the men had planned their escape so meticulously that they could have evaded the authorities for years, while others believed that they may have eventually been caught or succumbed to their criminal habits. The possibility that the England brothers and Frank Morris had lived quiet lives under assumed identities seemed increasingly plausible, even though it defied conventional expectations. By 2018, the FBI officially reopened the investigation, and forensic teams and handwriting experts were called in to re-examine the 2013 letter and the evidence surrounding the case. This time, they also looked into possible escape routes and retraced old leads. However, just like before, the results were inconclusive. No new evidence surfaced that could provide a definitive answer, and the case remained officially open, though it was clear that finding the truth, if it was even possible, would be incredibly difficult. The investigation into the mysterious letter from 2013 only deepened the enigma surrounding the Alcatraz escape. What happened to Frank Morris, John England, and Clarence England after that fateful night in 1962? Were they truly the masterminds behind the greatest escape in American prison history, or had the cold waters of the bay claimed their lives, erasing them from history? As the years passed and new revelations came to light, the mystery remained unresolved, continuing to captivate the public and keep the question alive: did the escapees truly pull off the impossible, or did they disappear forever into the darkness of history? The news that the Alcatraz escapees may have survived and lived for decades undetected sent shockwaves through both the public and law enforcement communities. After 55 years of speculation, myth-making, and official denials, the idea that Frank Morris and the England brothers outwitted the world's most secure prison ignited a firestorm of reactions. The public's reaction to the 2013 letter, when it finally surfaced publicly years later, reopened old wounds and fueled fresh debates. For the general public, the news landed like a plot twist in a true crime documentary, too incredible to believe yet too detailed to ignore. People who had long romanticized the escape as a clever underdog triumph felt vindicated. They beat the system, many said, echoing a sense of admiration that has surrounded the escape for decades. The notion that the three men not only survived the perilous swim from Alcatraz Island but also started new lives undetected tapped into a deep fascination with jailbreak legends and anti-hero narratives. Social media lit up with theories, memes, and amateur sleuthing. Investigators combed through old photographs, family archives, and even satellite images. In Facebook groups and Reddit threads dedicated to unsolved crimes, users debated the logistics of the escape with newfound energy. Some pointed to aging men in Brazil or rural Georgia who bore eerie resemblances to the Anglin brothers, while others dissected the contents of the 2013 letter line by line, treating it as a long-lost cipher. At the same time, there was skepticism. Many asked, why would the government hide this for so long? Why release this information now? Could the letter have been a hoax? Some suspected the release was part of a controlled leak or even an attempt to distract from other controversies. The lack of definitive DNA confirmation or a living witness kept many doubters in check. The question continued to bug enthusiasts: how had they escaped? What had their moves been? The execution of the night of the Great Escape, June 11, 1962, would go down in history as one of the most daring and mysterious escape attempts in American prison history. After months of careful preparation, Frank Morris, along with John and Clarence Anglin, executed their plan. But before they could attempt their escape, they needed to ensure their preparations were perfect and undetected. The first step was to remove the air vent covers in their cells. This would allow them to crawl through the hole they had created and enter a tunnel that led to the maintenance corridors behind the walls. They had crafted makeshift tools for this task, allowing them to carefully unscrew the vents and replace them with the dummy heads they had made. The dummies were positioned in such a way that even during the nightly head counts, they would appear lifelike and convince the guards that the inmates were still inside. Once the lights went out, the men made their move. They crawled through the holes and into the maze-like passageways, working silently and swiftly to avoid detection. The trio moved along the maintenance corridors and into a section of the prison that was rarely accessed by guards. They knew the layout of Alcatraz better than anyone, and that familiarity was crucial for avoiding the eyes of prison personnel. After making their way through the tunnels, they reached a small area near the roof of the building. From here, they would have to make their way across the roof and into the prison yard where they had hidden their rafts and other tools. The men had also prepared a set of ropes made from sheets, which would allow them to descend from the roof down to the ground. But the next obstacle was the prison's outer walls. A concrete barricade nearly impossible to scale stood between them and freedom. Undeterred, the men made use of the materials they had carefully amassed over the months: rubber raincoats, which they had stitched together into a makeshift raft. The idea was to use these raincoats as flotation devices, hoping they would carry them across the frigid waters of the bay to the distant mainland. They left nothing to chance, with each member of the group assuming a distinct role. While one of the men was tasked with paddling the raft, the others would provide support or take on various responsibilities. They knew they would have to be quiet and quick, as any noise or disruption could alert the guards and derail their escape. With everything set, they made their way through the darkened yard and into the water. The currents were fierce and unpredictable, and the cold temperature of the bay, often dipping below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, posed a serious threat to their survival. But the trio was determined. Driven by the promise of freedom that had eluded them for so long, they launched their raft into the water, braving the choppy, icy conditions. Their goal was to reach the distant shores of San Francisco, where they hoped to disappear into the crowd and start anew. As the hours passed, the three men paddled away from Alcatraz, fighting the relentless pull of the current. But their escape was far from simple. The harsh conditions of the bay, combined with the heavy tides and unpredictable winds, posed serious challenges. And as the men neared the end of their journey, the fate of their escape became uncertain. Some believe they were swept away by the unforgiving waters, drowning before they could make it to land. Others contend they successfully reached the shore and made their way to safety, though there's no hard evidence to confirm this. By morning, the escape was discovered. Guards found the dummies in the cells, but there was